Today we are talking about the psychology behind the UFO mystery. Are they real? UFOs and psychology. It's going to be good. And particularly if you're familiar with Carl Jung, be excited because we're taking a look at Carl Jung's thoughts on UFOs. Carl Jung was very interested in UFOs and even wrote a book on UFOs, which was, what was his book called? Let me just look it up real quick if anyone is interested. Flying Saucers, a Modern Myth of Things Seen in the Skies. So that's very, very cool. But we're going to be taking a look at this in general. So what's going on with UFOs? Are they real? What does psychology have to say about it? What does Carl Jung think about it? Sorry, I'm disappeared there. There we go. So this first article, we have a couple different things we're going to look at. This first one comes from Mind Matters, and it's a discussion on UFOs in general, but it gets into Carl Jung. So the author says, I've been reading psychologist Carl Jung's book on the subject. Oh, it's right. The name's right here. The name is right here. So for those who don't know, in these members only streams, I look less usually at the articles. So I'm really fresh in reacting to these. So anyway, he names the article, he names the book. I didn't have to look it up. He's been rereading. Well, actually, who I don't know if this is, who wrote this? Who wrote this article? Who wrote this article? Who's the David Klinghoffer. Okay. So anyway, David Klinghoffer has been reading psychologist Carl Jung's book on flying saucers, a modern myth of things in the skies, written in 1958. Jung got interested in UFOs around 1946, shortly after the development of the atom bomb. Very interesting, actually. I've been meaning to do a video about nuclear weapons and UFOs because there's something actually really interesting to discuss there. But, yeah, I completely forgot that I was gonna do that video. I need to work on that video. Anyway, the UFOs were showing up in many visual sightings and as blips on radar, not images and videos. Every other detail matches. So back then they didn't have images or videos, but they had blips on radar. So Jung writes, initial attempts to explain the UFOs as Russian or American inventions soon came to grief on their apparently weightless behavior. The crafts behave not like bodies, but like weightless thoughts. It's interesting as well. It's interesting because one idea that we've kind of kicked around is the possibility of UFOs being thought forms of some kind, or at least craft that are thought controlled, perhaps. And that's an interesting possibility. Their acceleration is such that if anything resembling a human being were steering them, he would be instantly killed. They are round, cigar-shaped, or cylindrical figures of various sizes, like the Tic Tac and saucers. It's very interesting. This shape is very, very common. So very, very interesting. And by the way, for those who don't know who Carl Jung is a Swiss psychiatrist who was extremely prominent in developing theories of the unconscious, specifically having to do with archetypes, structures in the mind. If you ever heard the term introvert and extrovert, Carl Jung coined them. Carl Jung believed in a collective unconscious that all humanity shares. Really fascinating individual. I don't agree with everything, but he very, very fascinating, and a lot of his ideas are really on point. I think he goes a little too far sometimes, but for the most part, I really like a lot of Jung's ideas. So it's great to see what his perspective was on UFOs. He says, most of these stories come from America. Witnesses are sober types, mostly people who don't believe in them or who regard the whole problem with indifference. So, in other words, these are reports coming from people who don't necessarily believe in them or don't really care. So it's not as though, what Carl Jung is saying, it's not as though they're coming from people who are, trying to spread rumors and or really want it to be true. It's people who are indifferent but have just encountered them. Airfields and atomic installations in particular hold a special attraction for them. Our airplanes seem to arouse their curiosity. They appear to have something to do with the latent emotion connected with imminence of war when the whole world is suffering under the strain of Russian policies. So, the author continues, so what are they? Human technology? No, not human, because they do impossible things. Alien technology? Seemingly not, because ditto, among other reasons. I think it depends how one defines alien. Again, I think it's a very, very complicated subject that's not easily compartmentalized. I've given my thoughts on this before. Government psyop? But the phenomenon are exactly the same today as they were in the 1950s. Only the name has changed. Surely government techniques would have evolved somewhat in the course of 70 years. Psychic projections? But they appear on video and radar. Yeah, I'm still, of the opinion that this could possibly be interdimensional activity, because it would sort of check off all these particular. It's still very strange and a very big open question. Definitely might not be that, but it's interesting to think about. Jung conjectured that they could be both projections and real physical phenomena. An instance of what he called synchronicity or meaningful coincidence. He offered further spiritual and psychological guesswork, citing the Sanskrit word mandala, which means circle, and medieval beliefs that the soul assumes a round shape. So we're going to look into this a little more. But Carl Jung essentially is thinking that it could be both real and projections at the same time. So what does that mean? I'll explain that in a minute. But let's look at another website here to get a little more insight into how Jung viewed this UFO phenomena. So it says C.G. Jung was one of the most influential thinkers of the 20th century. At heart, a curious man. He never shied away from strange subjects, and UFOs caught his attention. Jung thought of UFOs as psychic phenomena. So remember as well, if you're new to the field of psychology, psychic phenomena doesn't mean like paranormal. Psychic just means of the psyche, so of the mind. So psychic phenomena would mean mental phenomena. Jung thought of UFOs as being of the mind more than as physical objects. Whether or not UFOs existed for real was secondary to their psychological import. For Jung, UFOs were placeholders for collective mental distress that couldn't express itself otherwise. In Flying Saucers, 1959, Jung writes that psychological undercurrents expressing themselves as UFO sightings must be global. UFOs have been spotted around the world, and what's fueling these visions must be universal too. So UFOs, he thought of them as a release from atom bomb anxieties. After World War II, the possibility of mutual destruction loomed large in people's imagination. With the destruction of Earth becoming a technological possibility, people started to fantasize of other habitable planets and aliens who may live there. So Jung is kind of looking at this idea of humanity's collective consciousness sort of turning to the idea of other planets, UFOs, starcraft, etc. And UFOs as an antidote to overpopulation anxieties. Jung wonders to what degree UFOs might be escape fantasies for residents of an overpopulated world. Perhaps what the UFO mean is the Earth is growing too small for us and that humanity would like to escape from its prison. So just to be clear, what you have the real phenomenon of UFOs. Well, the possibly real phenomenon of UFOs as an object that actually exists out there in some capacity. What Jung is conjecturing is that it's a vision, basically, like a collectively shared vision. However, as we'll see, he thinks that they could be a collective vision or projection of the mind, projection of the unconscious, and real at the same time. We'll see what that means, but I want to set it straight that what's sort of being discussed in this article here is Jung's idea that, oh, the mind is conjuring this. You know, just as in the past, maybe the mind may have conjured the image of angels or gods. Now the mind is conjuring like a vision of UFOs. So why is this? And he's trying to give reasons that the mind would be doing this. You know, atom bomb anxieties. The mind is turning to someplace off Earth. Overpopulation. The Earth is growing too small for us. Again, off Earth. UFO as a consolation for a godless world. Nietzsche, one of Jung's big influences, proclaimed God's death and said that this will existentially disorient people. If God is no longer above us, perhaps other beings are, and perhaps UFOs are proof we might have a relationship with them. So Nietzsche pronouncing the death of God was sort of Nietzsche saying that when humanity no longer believes in God or divine moral order, that all things will sort of lose meaning and humanity will be thrown into a nihilistic state. Nietzsche offered his idea of the Übermensch or Overman as the antidote to this. Nietzsche, I don't consider to be a nihilist, but rather as an existentialist, and that Nietzsche was against nihilism. But anyway, so basically what this proposes is, well, if people are losing faith in God and a divine moral order, perhaps now they're turning to the idea, like psychologically and consciously, right? Because they're looking, that's what humans do. They look for some external thing. Oh, if God doesn't exist, maybe the aliens exist, and this is something that is above me that I can have a relationship with. So this is another option that Jung is throwing out there as an idea for the possibility of it being a mental phenomenon, projection of the unconscious mind. And then the UFO is mandalas. UFOs are spherical, spotless, and often glow. This reminds Jung of mandalas, ancient symbols of totality and order. For Jung, a fragmented and disorderly world psyche naturally projects mandalas into the sky, and they appear to some people as UFOs. So mandalas are symbols of unity and are often symbols of unity for the unity of existence, the unity of reality. So a mandala is usually a cyclical pattern, a circular pattern with various patterns, but it's circular and it represents unity. So Jung is thinking that perhaps because of humanity's fragmented state, the mind, wants unity, and so is projecting a mandala, and humanity mistakens that mandala as being a UFO. And remember, and I'm going to explain to you, though, how he also thinks it could also be a real phenomena, and what I think about this, and because I know some of these ideas sound a little out there, but it's interesting to see Jung's ideas, because remember, Jung had visions all the time. Jung was really on the edge of sanity there. Jung wrote the Red Book, which is a collection of all his different visions and experiences that he had. So he was very familiar with the mind's ability to have visions. And so his initial idea here is that a UFO is a vision of some kind. Because remember, coming from Jung's time, what was it, in the late 1940s, early 1950s, something like that, whenever this was going on. I don't recall the exact date. But people are seeing these things all over the place. And so Jung's going, what's happening? And he's going, oh, well, maybe it's a collective hallucination because of things that are happening globally. The disordered state of the world, the threat of humanity's destruction, the existential lack of a higher being. Perhaps humanity is collectively then projecting mandalas or other ideas that are above us, etc. And it says, why UFO? Because Jung writes, quote, anything that looks technological goes down without difficulty with modern man. End quote. The unconscious mind cleverly expresses an ancient archetype of wholeness and deliverance, the mandala, as a tech object to sidestep our rationalistic filters. So, in other words, if we experience a mandala as, if we interpret that as some sort of technological invention, it satisfies our rational mind because it makes sense rather than it being some, oh, what is this mandala? So the unconscious mind is expressing an ancient archetype of wholeness and deliverance in a technological way to sort of sidestep our rational filters. So it says, bottom line, in the debate over UFOs' existence, their psychological significance gets lost. Whether they exist or not, it's instructive to look at UFOs as projections of our collective unconscious. Perhaps the UFOs are symbolic carriers of psychic messages we need to hear. So, okay, you have this idea of Jung looking into UFOs. And he's coming up with all these psychological ideas for it. Like, oh, maybe it's a projection of a mandala, or people looking for a higher power, or our anxiety of a disordered and fractured world and the threat of nuclear war. Humanity is engaging in these collective hallucinations. But then, lo and behold, they're detected on radar. And so, oh, okay, well, radar detection, etc., rules out collective hallucination. Hallucinations aren't things that are detected on radar. So, if we take a look at, where is it? A letter. Here's a letter. You can see it. This is a letter that was written by Carl Jung. To an individual named Harrison about UFOs. So this is a letter that Jung wrote. The problem of the UFOs is, as you rightly say, a very fascinating one. But it is as puzzling as it is fascinating, since in spite of all observations I know of, there is no certainty about their nature. On the other side, there is an overwhelming material pointing to their legendary or mythological aspect. As a matter of fact, the psychological aspect is so impressive that one, and I like this, that one almost must regret that the UFOs seem to be real after all. I have followed up the literature as much as possible, and it looks to me as if something were seen and even confirmed by radar. But nobody knows exactly what is seen. In consideration of the psychological aspect of the phenomena, I have written a book about it, which is soon to appear. It is also in the process of being translated, blah, 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 blah. So it's interesting. Jung wrote the booklet. I'm assuming, is he talking about the book? I'm assuming he's talking about the book that was published that we've been discussing. So he writes and he goes, well, there's, the psychological aspect behind them is so powerful. He's like, it's almost too bad that it seems like that they are real because they've been detected by radar. So there's this idea that, remember, in this other article, it says that Jung believed that they could be psychological and real with regard to the phenomenon of synchronicity. Okay, so what does this mean? Now, keep in mind, I haven't read Jung's book. I haven't. I'm going off of, what's said in these articles here. So, what we know is that Jung believed very much in their psychological importance and significance. Jung also thought that they were real. And according to this article, he thinks that they're tied together in synchronicity. So, let me put my interpretation of what that would mean and what I'm pretty sure that Carl Jung meant by that. So synchronicity is what can be described in a very shorthand way as meaningful coincidence. But what synchronicity really means is when an external state matches an internal state. When an internal state of consciousness matches an external event. So sort of the archetypal story to describe synchronicity is when Carl Jung was having a talk with one of his patients, and she was describing a dream she had, and in the dream she was describing at that time a certain type of beetle that was very rare, a very rare type of beetle. And while she's describing this, they hear a tapping on the window, and they look, and it's that beetle. And so synchronicity is the coincidence of, and meaningful coincidence of an external state matching an internal state. And so Jung believes that UFOs are psychological phenomena and real. So how this could be tied together in synchronicity is essentially the idea that humans are in a state, as described, threat of nuclear war, looking for a higher power, fragmented, looking for unity. Because of this, their internal psyche is projecting the idea of a UFO, but synchronistically, there are actual UFOs as well. So it would be the idea of, oh, one thought about a beetle, and then, oh, synchronistically, there is a beetle too. Interesting. That synchronicity, that's interesting. So it would be this idea that Jung is saying that humanity is having these ideas of UFOs psychologically in the mind, and they also really exist out there, is how synchronicity would be tied to it. Now, another point in these articles, in one of the articles that I just read, said something along the lines of, well, it doesn't really matter if UFOs are real or if they're a projection. We can learn from studying, how did they say it? Whether they exist or not, it's instructive to look at UFOs as a projection of our collective unconscious as symbolic carriers. So in essence, like, it can be helpful to, even if they're real or not real or whatever, we can look at what they mean symbolically and learn from it. Even though that might not be what they actually mean, we can learn from it if we interpret it that way. And this is an important point that I want to hit home here. So Carl Jung initially starts thinking, oh, well, these are projections of the psyche because humanity is looking for unity, etc. But then lo and behold, oh, radar detects it. Like, oh, wow, they're actually real. They're out there. And he even said, wow, that's almost regrettable because blah, 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 blah. There's so much interesting ideas behind it. This is where I think that Jung, I love Jung's ideas, but I think sometimes he goes too far in where he does make leaps that aren't necessarily there. Like, oh yes, this particular thing means that the mind is searching for blah. Here's a good example. Dreams. Jung believes that dreams are always a symbolic representation of the self. So if you have a dream of your mother, that's not your mother, that's the motherly side of you. If you have a dream of a child, it's not that, let's say you have a dream of your baby brother, that's not actually your baby brother, that's a side of you that so if that, let's say that baby is crying, it means your inner child perhaps needs to be nurtured or whatever. So I think that dreams do mean things like this a lot. However, I think there's sometimes where dreams can just mean what they mean at face value. If you have a doctor's appointment coming up next week, you might dream about going to the doctor and the doctor slicing your hand off or something. And it doesn't mean that the doctor represents the toxin that's inside of you and you're yearning for health or something. It's because you have anxiety about going to the doctor, and so you have a dream about seeing the doctor. However, so I think Jung goes too far sometimes, and I think like the UFO thing is probably an example of that. And I don't know for sure. They could literally mean that. It could be. This is my opinion. I think, but however, despite that, I think that whether it literally or whether it actually means a certain thing or not, I think one can learn from it. So, for example, let's say the doctor scenario. Let's say that your mind, you dream that because you just have anxiety about going to the doctor. But let's say you do dream analysis and you ascribe to it a much deeper meaning. Oh, the doctor represents my my need for inner healing, etc. Well, even if it didn't actually mean that, your analysis of that could be helpful. You could go, oh, see, so your analysis of that can get you looking at yourself and going, oh, this dream is telling me that I need to, deal with the inner toxins. What's in my life that's toxic that needs to be cut out? What can I do in my life to improve it? So see, it gets you thinking about your life and improving things. So I think that, and you can do that with tarot cards as well. You can look at tarot cards and go, oh, I'm seeing this thing. What am I going to symbolically interpret this? Oh, this means, I'm getting the intuition that, there's an unhealthy relationship that I need to address, etc. And it might not mean that at all, but you're interpreting that. And it's your unconscious is going to likely, if you're intuitive and you've worked on your intuition and do dream analysis correctly, you are going to find things that connect to you and that are helpful. So I think in the end, it doesn't actually matter if the things mean what they mean, if we can learn something from it. But I think it's also important to be grounded in reality. So, for example, like the doctor thing, I think one should recognize that, hey, look, sometimes we have dreams for face value reasons. A lot of the time, they can hold deep archetypal resonances, but sometimes they're pretty much. But it still highlights things that we can learn from. However, if we interpret them in symbolic ways, we can still extract meaning from them. So I think that we can still do that while also staying rationally grounded and realizing that we are perhaps making connections that aren't actually there, but still help us. So that's what I want to say with regarding that. And that's kind of my view on Jung a lot. I think Jung is fantastic. I think he has brilliant insights. I think he goes a little too far sometimes. However, one can still learn from it. Like I said, with the dreams, that I think that's a good example. So with the things like UFOs, I doubt that they are projections, because Jung would essentially think, okay, well, it's both. They're projections and also they are real. I doubt that they are like actual projections of the human psyche. However, that doesn't mean we can't learn from them. If we think about the interesting ideas like, oh, this is humanity's yearning for unity and connectedness, we can think about those ideas and contemplate those ideas, and that can be getting us thinking about topics that need attention and are cool. But I doubt that it's actually that. That's my opinion, of course. But all in all, I think that this is a really interesting idea in looking at Carl Jung's thought processes. And I think highlighting the pros and cons of Carl Jung. I think Jung is a fantastic thinker and a brilliant thinker, goes a little overboard sometimes, and makes connections that aren't necessarily there, yet can still be helpful if coming from a rational perspective, because it's important to stay grounded. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed that. I thought it was really fascinating to take a look at Carl Jung. Fascinating mind, brilliant mind, who had visions themselves all the time. So very, very brilliant. I hope you enjoyed it, my friends. And as always, this has been a members only video. I release one members only video to the public once a month. So maybe you'll see this, maybe you won't. But I want to give a big shout out to everyone who supports, especially Renaissance Fairy, Cassidy, Angela, the Halloween Mom, DB, Enki, Nusalina, Paul Rogers, Eric Fire, Masam, Ryan, Christopher, and everyone else. Thank you very much.